In this lesson, we're going to take a look at the core components that make up a Spring Data project. To see these components, we're going to work with a simple Spring Boot application that we have created in order to persist a simple book entity. Spring Boot is a tool provided by the folks at Spring that helps simplify the configuration of Spring applications. So much of the configuration of this project has been done behind the scenes by Spring Boot. But that brings us to the first component of a Spring Data project, and that's the configuration aspect. Here you see the application.properties file, and this file contains several pieces of configuration that dictate Spring Data's behavior. So here we see the spring.jpa.hibernate.ddl auto property, which has been set to create drop. And that's just telling Spring Data how to create the DDL within our project. And it's going to be auto generated by Hibernate. You see we're also setting the showSQL property to true, and that's going to provide us with a little bit more verbose logging in our application. Now, if we look at our Spring Data Demo application class, you're going to see that it has been annotated with the Spring Boot application annotation. And that's going to provide a lot of configuration behind the scenes. It's going to inspect the starter projects within the POM, and that's going to pull in our various dependencies for our application and put a lot of conventions in place that alleviate the need for us to do a lot of configuration. The next item we're going to take a look at within a Spring Data project is our domain model or our entities. So within this project, we are using JPA, and you'll notice that we have this book class that represents an object within our data model. We have annotated all of our fields on the book class, and this serves as that domain object that we would like to persist into our data store. So if you'll remember, within Spring Data, we use repositories to persist our domain objects. So here we see the book repository interface. And you'll notice it's just an interface, but it extends a JPA repository. And that is a flag to Spring Data that it needs to provide an implementation of this book repository. You'll also notice the repository annotation on this interface, and that also will be picked up by Spring Data as a marker to create the implementation of this repository. So all of the persistence logic that needs to be created to insert, update, delete, or read this entity or this domain object from our data store will be provided by Spring Data. So when we look at our Spring Data Demo application, you'll see the main method just grabs an application context, pulls the repository out of the application context, and then we create a new book and we persist the book using the save method. And that's it. You don't see any prepared statements. All of that is done behind the scenes. You're not handling any exceptions that may be thrown from your persistence code as you would with JDBC. So you can see how simple it becomes to persist to your data store. So let's just quickly run this application, and you'll notice that the Spring Boot console fires up within our console, and then we have the table being created, and you can see that within our logs. And then we insert our book entity, and then eventually we clean up our DDL because we've specified the create drop option within our configuration properties. So this should give you a glimpse of how simple it is to write data to a data store using Spring Data. It's going to simplify the way you write code within your applications because you are no longer responsible for writing all the plumbing code to save data to and from your database.